I hope you enjoyed that little montage of my very short trip to Cres. That was an annual meeting between three research institutions. One of them is the research institution at the faculty where I'm officially employed, and the other two are a research institute from Rijeka University and one from Belgrade. It was very interesting to take part in the, I'll say, round table where each institute presented the work that they have been doing for the last year. And we kind of had an opportunity to get to know each other's work and what we focus on, and then further develop possibilities of collaboration on some research topic where like we overlap and we have maybe some interests. So I mean, my contribution was very minimal. I mean, non-existent technically. I was just there to observe and listen and learn, and mostly, I mean, I presented myself, but it was very interesting to meet other academics and to see how these collaborations come to be. And I'm really, really grateful for that opportunity. And we have already set the dates for next year when we will have another annual meeting where we also discuss, I guess, the projects or the success of the projects that we have currently arranged, so to speak. We have decided to kind of collaborate on. So apart from that, I mean, Cres is always beautiful no matter what time of the year you go, and I highly recommend it if you haven't been to Croatia or any of the Croatian islands. Cres is very close to Rijeka. You can take a catamaran from Rijeka, or there's like several other options where you can take a bus through Krk, and then you take like a boat, or you can take a ferry from another pier which is nearby. So I guess it depends how you travel, whether you are by car or if you don't have your own vehicle, then you can take a catamaran from Rijeka. And it was, Rijeka is also a very beautiful city, and yeah, I highly recommend it if you haven't been. Those are the only places I've visited so far in Croatia, apart from Lipa, which is a little village nearby, and another place. Oh, I forgot the name of it. But it was part of this study trip that I took 2 or 3 years ago. It was also in Palača Mojse, which is like an institute where they organize all kinds of residencies or academic residencies, and I think there is also a possibility for you to apply to spend some time there and do some work if you are an artist, writer, or if you are an academic. So I mean, you can check their website. I'll leave the link in the description. Okay, so while I was there, I had very little time to read, and I finished just a few days ago. I finished this book. I already mentioned it 2 times, and now that I've read it, I feel like it is a very good book for you to go beyond the mainstream reading list on Palestine that have been circling on social media among the recommended books. It's very critical. It's sort of trying to create this cooperation and global resistance movement. It's trying to kind of plant seeds about the potential power of resistance in globally, unification between different indigenous communities and how they resist occupation and oppression, and how what is the power in unifying those split up resistances. That I also found it very informing in the context of how she deconstructs Zionism, especially because she uses some Zionist ideologues who I have not heard of before. So that was kind of enlightening. And then she also uses, because she includes all of the layers of Palestinian society, not just she doesn't approach the Palestinian resistance from this heteronormative perspective, but she includes queer resistance as well. And she talks a lot about how Israel splits the division, how Israel divides the Palestinian society based on on the struggles, different struggles that different parts of Palestinian community have, whether it is in West Bank or in Gaza. So from that perspective, it's very rich and it's very inclusive, and it gives a new light to understand how all of these struggles should be united. One part that I would like to read to you is where she talks about, this is towards the end of the book, which I found very striking. I was actually reading it to my partner. If I can find it now, that would be a success. Yeah, here she talks about how does the alliance between U.S. as a settler colonial project work with the settler colonial project that is Israel. And she says, it is important to note that Israel is required to spend most of the money it gets from the USA on US weapons purchases, effectively looping it back into US coffers, and more specifically the military-industrial complex. Meanwhile, Israel rallies on the USA to be the outside power, the iron wall Jabotinsky had declared was necessary to subdue the Palestinians. In his seminal essay discussed in Chapter 1, Settler Colonialism and Indigenous Resistance, Jabotinsky had written, Zionist colonialism must either stop or else proceed regardless of the native population, which means that it can proceed and develop only under the protection of a power that is independent of the native population, behind an iron wall which the native population cannot breach. He immediately went on to explain that the iron wall would be an outside power, and presumed this would be Great Britain, which first promised parts of Palestine to the European Zionists. As England eventually stepped away from this role, the USA took over as a patron of the new country, Jabotinsky writes. That is our Arab policy, not what we should be, but what it actually is, whether we admit it or not. What need otherwise of the Balfour Declaration or of the Mandate? Their value to us is that outside power has undertaken to create in the country which conditions of administration and security that if the native population should desire to hinder our work, they will find it impossible. What has grown to become a reciprocal relationship is seen in the way that the USA adopts techniques and technologies of repression, first tested by Israel against the indigenous Palestinian population. This is amply evident today in the way the US practices against communities residing within its borders, the policing, surveillance, racial profiling, counterinsurgency methods, and hypermilitarization that Israel has perfected against the Palestinian people. It is now quite common to see military equipment, armored personnel, carriers, Humvees, assault rifles, and other trappings of urban warfare deployed in American city streets to squash protests against murderous police racism, just as Israel uses its military powers and personnel to subdue Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. Here, however, it must be noted that the USA did not learn racism or violence from Israel. The USA predates Israel by centuries, and the North American colonies were founded on racism, first and foremost against the indigenous peoples of this continent, then against Africans and their descendants. The history of racist American policing is part and parcel of the history of this country. Suggesting that Israel and the joint trainings of US and Israeli security forces are the source of racism in US police departments is anachronistic and shifts the blame away from the USA. It cannot be overemphasized that the US police forces have been racist since their very inception, with many American police forces in southern cities having their origin as slave patrols hunting down runaway enslaved people. And then she goes into detail here about that history. I won't read any longer. It's quite a long, I read more than a page, almost page and a half. So I highly recommend it if it is something that you want to acquaint yourself with, or you're looking for new literature on Palestine that is challenging common analytical approach that you might find in other books that you have read or have seen, then this book is for you. And then finally, I read Igor Štiks Rezalište that is part of the 3 novels that I chose to read about Yugoslavia. And even though Štiks currently resides in the Balkans, he resides in Belgrade, in Serbia, I still decided to include his book as part of the Diaspora Writes Yugoslavia, because at one point he did live abroad and he wrote a lot about what it means to be a refugee, how he questioned this his own identity and the idea of citizenship. He has written, I think, theoretical books about it. So this novel starts off with a family meeting over lunch. The city or the place this family lunch is, it is slowly evolving into this kind of very dramatic confrontation with family history is not specified. So we don't know where this city is, although at one point in the novel he does mention Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but not as the location where the main characters have encountered each other. So the book is split into several parts. It's sort of like divided as a course meal. So you have like a division, like he says here, he titles it Aperitiv, predjelo, glavno jelo, sir, kolač, digestiv. It's almost like some kind of preparation for the culmination of what is to come. It's sort of like giving you like you have a pre-course, then you have a main course, then a main dish, then you have, I don't know, he calls it here cheese. Main course, then you have cheese, then you have kolač, which is sort of like a cookie or maybe some kind of cake, and digestive, digestive, I don't know what that means. So this family is meeting, that is the son and his family. Son is called Vladimir. He's coming to lunch with his father and his mother after 25 years of being completely absent from this region. We learn that they come from US. He's coming with his wife and son. The son is not speaking the native language. He is speaking only in English, and mother is sort of acting as this translator for his grandparents. And we slowly we are literally pushed into this family dynamic. And the family dynamic starts off first as sort of teasing and some kind of jokes, and you can see that there is some antagonism between the father and the son. Father, that is the grandfather Clement, and the son Vladimir. And soon we are kind of introduced to another character who is unexpectedly arriving, and we learn that is another son who hasn't been in touch with his brother or his mother and father for 25 years. From then on, it's slowly the history of the events that took place as the war started. We are slowly introduced to these events that have culminated in complete dissolution of the family. And it's sort of like, I would say that it's sort of like a metaphor for the dissolution of Yugoslavia, because it felt like, while I was reading it, felt like it was the family have been killed, and the country that they resided in was also killed, and as a consequence of the murder of the country, the family was also kind of murdered in the sense. I mean, we learn also, and now I'm going to spoil it for you, so if you don't want to, if you plan on reading this book at some point, maybe you should stop watching now. So we also learned that there was another brother who died during the war, and there is this chasm that is created between the father and his two sons because of the impossible decision that the family had to make when there was a convoy for civilians, and there was only one spot in the convoy for one of them. And the choice was made that Vladimir, the eldest son, would take this spot, and the rest of the family will try to join him later in this territory that was considered like a safe zone outside of this area where the main conflict was happening. And he doesn't go into, like, he doesn't say which area that is, where they're, what city they're living, but you can assume, because the city is besieged. Štiks himself was born in Sarajevo. You can pretty much, tell that it's Sarajevo that he's talking about. And this is the point where kind of the family is split apart. First, Vladimir leaves. Then this tragic event happens where the younger brother is shot by a sniper and he's killed. And Igor, the middle brother who was there and witnessed this, and his brother died in his arms, sort of like couldn't bear the fact that he survived and his brother was shot. He kept like questioning why the person who was shooting through a sniper decided to kill just one of them and not both of them. And he kind of starts reporting on the war. He becomes a war correspondent, and he continues doing the work even after the end of the war in Bosnia, I would assume. It's his way of sort of trying to, his father says that he's still trying to find that one bullet to to basically die, because he never forgave himself for surviving and his brother dying. And then more secrets come up, and we learn also that the chasm between Igor and Vladimir exists because Vladimir married Igor's girlfriend, and they have a child together. Their son has never even heard of the family members, or that his father has two brothers, and it's sort of like unraveling and unraveling and unraveling, and you kind of come to a point where you're like, what else are they hiding? And it's really, I would say that this novel really shows how the transgenerational trauma of war persists in this region. First, as we are told this story, which is the most recent history of the family, we also learn of the great grandfather, Oscar, who was also a soldier in the First World War, and then he disappeared during the Second World War. He was taken away by the Germans, and he never returned home, and we don't know what happened to him. We can just assume, and you can see that every generation in the family survived at least one war and is carrying also the burden of the trauma of war trauma the previous generation has been carrying. So like you carry your own trauma from the war and you carry your parents' trauma from the war. And this is like sort of as the generations progress, as you come closer to this time, you kind of see how the baggage is getting bigger and bigger. And it was very, for me, this novel struck me because I've experienced these wars here that we had in the 90s, and I am also someone who kind of, with my family, left Bosnia in the nick of time before everything was shut down and nobody could leave, and you would be stuck there. And I became a refugee as a child, and it sort of like really hit the nail on the head for me. I felt like my own personal story was mirrored in their retelling, although of course there's more tragedy here than, I mean, I guess it's not a competition, you can't compare it, but I think this one resonated the most, even though the other two novels as well that I read for this series of vlogs have resonated with me as well, but this one in particular, possibly because it is set in Bosnia, so maybe that's the reason. So, or that is Yugoslavia, but today it's Bosnia and Herzegovina. There you go. And then I was going online and searching for Štiks to see if I can find some information about him. And I found something that I didn't even know existed. I'm going to read now. So he has signed the Declaration on the Common Language of the Croats, Serbs, Bosniaks, and Montenegrins. And then this is all on Wikipedia. And the Declaration on the Common Language was issued in 2017 by a group of intellectuals and NGOs from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Montenegro, and Serbia, who were working under the banner of a project called Language and Nationalism. The declaration states that Bosniaks, Croats, Montenegrins, and Serbs have a common standard language of the polycentric type. Before any public presentation, the declaration was signed by over 200 prominent writers, scientists, journalists, activists, and other public figures from the 4 countries. And then I'm just gonna read. It says the declaration states that Bosniaks, Croats, Montenegrins, and Serbs have common standard language of the polycentric type. It refers to the fact that 4 peoples communicate effectively without an interpreter due to their mutual intelligibility, which is a key notion when talking about languages. Furthermore, it points out that the current language policy of emphasizing differences has led to a number of negative phenomena, and linguistic expression is imposed as a criterion of ethno-national affiliation and a means of affirming political loyalty. The declaration states that language and people do not have to coincide, and that each state or nation may independently codify its own variant of the common language, and that the 4 standard variants enjoy each state. The declaration calls for abolishing all forms of linguistic segregation and discrimination in educational and public institutions. I thought this was very interesting. I read this part because I don't know how familiar anyone who is going to be watching this vlog is with the linguistic differences between Bosniaks, Croats, Serbs, and Montenegrins. And when people come here who don't know anything about this region, and when they ask me, like, so you speak Serbian and Croat speaks Croatian, but you understand each other, how is that possible? And it's very difficult to explain, because at the same time you understand that the creation of these languages in separate ways, like I always say it's like a dialect, you know. I in Serbia we have many dialects as well, and sometimes it can be difficult to understand someone who comes from a different part of Serbia. Especially, for example, my grandfather is from south of Serbia, a small village which is close to the Bulgarian border, and they speak this dialect that is very close to Bulgarian. Like I am not able to understand sometimes what they're saying because it's closer to Bulgarian than Serbian. And then, you know, within the languages that are spoken in this region, we have different dialects that are called Ijekavica, Ikavica, or Ekavica, and they're basically spread around the ex-Yugoslavian region, within these countries that I mentioned before. So I just found the project very interesting, and I thought it was something that maybe some of you would like to also be familiarized with. So I've yammered again for a long time, but before I go, I want to just mention briefly that I will be reading 3 books for the next vlog. I am also planning to read in between other things, and I will be probably uploading different vlogs about those books. But for now, for this particular format that I said in my Booktube newbie tag that I will be doing, I'll be reading 3 books, and all 3 books are by female authors from Italy, and all 3 authors are considered to be like feminist authors, Italian feminist authors. The first one is called A Woman by Sibilla Aleramo. This one, and it says, when her carefree aspirational childhood in a seaside town is brought brutally to an end, the nameless narrator of Sibilla Aleramo's blazing autobiographical novel discovers the shocking reality of life for a woman in Italy at the dawn of the 20th century. And then Natalia Ginzburg, Sagittarius. I think this one will be more familiar. I've never heard of Sibilla before. It says here, a domineering mother moves from a small town to the suburbs of a city with her daughter and son-in-law, yet soon grows restless with her new life. When she strikes up a friendship with the mysterious Scylla, her world suddenly seems rich with potential, and before long, the pair are planning to open an art gallery together. That is Natalia Ginzburg. And the last one, this is a most recent republication of Alba de Céspedes, her side of the story. And I believe if you are on Bookstagram or on Booktube, and if you read literary fiction, you came across this one, unless you have already read it. It says, Alessandra has always wanted more than life offered her. Growing up in a crowded apartment block in 1930s Rome, she watches as her mother's dreams of becoming a concert pianist are stifled by marriage. When her father's traditional family tried to make Alessandra marry at a young age, she rebels against the future they imagine for her. So you see like a theme here. Women struggling with patriarchy. Yeah, I mean, two tiny ones and one not so tiny. I'm looking forward to this. And yeah, I guess the other books that I will be reading, I'll be mentioning in some other vlog. They are for my PhD, and also some other novels that are not included in this format, where I'm like reading books that have similar or same themes. I'll be all over the place this summer, and I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, catch you in the next vlog. Thank you for watching.